proof's in the pudding, and the pudding was empty.
What?
Gather around, kids. It's story time. This story is a complicated journey. This story doesn't have an ending yet. All right, it's time to install the Annex suspension. It's been a while getting to this point. I've already installed these once, had a bit of an issue, had to send them back, got them back, and now hopefully it will work the way they're supposed to. This story began when I purchased the Annex suspension, Fast Road Pros. I was very excited to put them on my car. They felt amazing. The performance of them, the damping characteristics, the adjustability was perfect for a road car. Like Lloyd here. However, there was one concerning aspect. Check out these beauties. Huh? Don't they look good? I mean, they have been on my car for a little bit, so they're not super clean, but man, I do really like just the appearance of these. I think they look really, really nice. We're going to put the rears on first and see how these work, make sure that they don't rattle, and then we'll see about putting the fronts on. Rattling that came from the rear coilovers. We don't know for sure how they go back in the box. We don't know for sure what was causing the noise. What we do know is that that noise was not supposed to be happening. All right, so we got the wheels off. What we're gonna do is remove the OEM coilover assembly. One thing that you can do is mark the factory torque specs on these bolts is 62 foot-pounds, 59 foot-pounds, and 28 foot-pounds over there. So just using a Sharpie or a paint marker is super convenient whenever you want to remember the torque specs without having to open up the factory manual every time. So just a little free tip for you. Now we gotta take off the OEM coilover, and we're going to match that length that it's at right now with the coilover, the Annex suspension coilovers. So basically we're just gonna set those next to each other, get it pretty close, and then I'll use some digital calipers to make sure each side is as close as possible with the other side. After installing them once, driving them around for a couple months, seeing if, hey, maybe it's part of the break-in process, will it go away? Multiple nut and bolt checks, double checking the factory maintenance manual to make sure everything was torqued to spec. They never went away. All right, once you have all the hardware removed from the lower control arms, you're going to remove the two screws right here. They are not torqued down very tight. It's I think it's like 22 foot-pounds or maybe 14 foot-pounds. I'll check the manual later, but these are very low torque, so you can take them off with a wrench or just any sort of light-duty drill to get them off. But they're right here. Super easy to get to, and that's what I'm doing now. Me being an understanding individual, I contacted the manufacturer and I said, hey, here's a video that's unlisted on YouTube of this rattling going on. You know, if it was an honest mistake, I didn't want to bag on them or anything right out of the gate, right? Now that the rear coilovers are unscrewed, they are undone right here. We just took the bolts out up top. We can just slide these down, pull them out, and then we can match the lengths to the Annex suspension coilovers. So let's go ahead and do that. They were very helpful. They offered me quite a few different solutions that I could try to remedy the issue. Now, the length matching with the OEM is not super important because I'm probably going to lower it a centimeter or two later. So we don't have to get that measurement exact, but what we do have to get exact is the measurement between the two coilovers. So these have a preset spring rate, or spring preload. So theoretically, I should be able to measure just from this bottom ring to the top of this ring. But since the spring preload may be slightly different as far as how much they had to, or where they had to start the spring preload and how much they had to compress it. Well, how much they had to compress it should be exactly the same on both sides, but depending on where they started, maybe a tiny bit different if the spring is, you know, for some reason a millimeter or two longer, which on something like this I wouldn't be surprised. So what I'm going to try to do, my calipers aren't big enough to measure all the way from here to the bottom of this, but I'm going to try to find some reference point where I can make sure that the distances between the two coilovers are exactly the same. So let's go ahead and match the length to the OEM coilover first, and then we can match the lengths between the two sides on the annex coilovers after that. And that included taking the shocks off, doing some modification to some of these bushings, putting them back on, seeing if I could rotate the springs with my hand, which I shouldn't be able to. However, these rotate very easily, as I will show in the video. So one thing I'm noticing is this little hole right here on the annex suspension coilovers, right here, the threaded portion should be at least 1 centimeter below that, which is quite a bit lower than the OEM coilovers. I'm guessing that the annex just won't compress as much whenever I drop the car, and so it'll end up being close to the OEM. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to screw in the coilover body to this lower piece until it's about 1 centimeter past that little window. And then I'm going to match that to the other side. We'll drop the car and we'll see where it sits. Hopefully it'll be pretty close to the OEM or just a little lower. I'm not sure why. They actually rotate easier now than when I first had them. That brings me to sending them back. I was never able to figure out what the issue was. I wasn't able to do anything that remedied the problem. I sent them back and I said, hey, maybe you can fix them, see what's going on, if there's something internally that's happening that's not supposed to. You know, they took them back. I had to pay for the shipping back. They had them for a couple months. They replaced a few parts, they had done some redesigns. So it looks like the spring preloads put both of these distances right here from the top of these rubber bushings, which there could be a little play in there. I'm not too concerned about that much play. At most, it'll be like maybe a millimeter. Probably less than that. But the distance between the top of these bushings and the bottom of this part right here, this surface, is exactly 6 3/4 inches. So I'm pretty confident using the bottom, this bottom ring here, the lock ring for the spring preload, to the top of this ring will be a good way to reference both sides and make sure that just this space here is exactly the same on both sides. So let's go ahead and do that. So I was hopeful that the changes they made and the parts they swapped out on them would fix the issue. It didn't. It didn't. Which is why we're here now, packaging them back up. I'm pretty bummed out about it. Okay, so I screwed the body into this lower piece until the threads completely covered this little window. Now what I'm going to do to make sure I go past it at least 1 centimeter is I'm going to screw this down until it is 1 centimeter away from this body. Then I'm going to verify that. I don't know what Annex could do to make me try these again. I feel kind of burned that I've gone through this much. I've spent, I don't know, at least $200 or $300 on alignments, just making sure everything is spick and span. I did everything I could to make sure that these were installed properly and everything was kosher, but it was not enough, unfortunately. Okay, that's 10 millimeters. So now I'm going to screw this part in until it touches this bottom lock ring. And now that way I know that I'm at least 1 centimeter past that window. I'm going to measure this distance now that the body is 1 centimeter past this little window. I'm going to measure this distance and apply the same distance to this coilover. So that distance is 38 millimeters, or actually 38.8 is the distance between these two rings. I'm going to get some painter's tape to mark this as a reference point, and then I'm going to distance the other coilover. Okay, I couldn't find painter's tape, so I just got some plumber's tape, which is fine. It's just there to temporarily mark the position, so when I put it on the car, I don't go too far off. There we go. So that'll just serve as a marker for where this ring is supposed to be. But this sucks. I really liked the performance aspect of these. They felt really good. If it's just gonna rattle and sound like it's falling apart, can't abide that. Never got to play with the camber. Never got to do any of that. I really had high hopes. I mean, I was very excited to get these working. And like I said, they felt amazing. I mean, they performed really, really well. But there is just something weird going on in this set, at least, that is just not supposed to be happening. I don't know, man. It sucks. Annex, if you're watching this, I don't know what to tell you that I haven't already said in the emails, but I hope this doesn't happen to anyone else, because this sucks. This has been a terrible experience. Okay, so I couldn't remember the torque spec for the top hat bolts, but it is 22 foot-pounds. I annotated it right next to it in the factory maintenance manual, so I'm going to get them finger tight, then I'll use the torque wrench to finish them off. All right, we got the top hat nuts torqued to 22 foot-pounds. We didn't use an impact wrench. Now we're just going to torque these locking rings to the appropriate spec. I need to look in the manual to double check what that is. And then I'm going to use the torque wrench, torque it to the proper spec, take it for a ride, see if we hear any more of that clunking that I heard last time. Fingers crossed I don't. Hopefully what they did fixes it. I'll be really bummed out if they still clunk around. But if they do, I'm gonna go ahead and post this video because this is a problem that kind of needs to be, I mean, this is a serious issue. I followed the manual to the letter the first time I installed these. I didn't over tighten anything. I didn't use a impact wrench where I wasn't supposed to. So yeah, I really hope this little clunking sound is no longer. So let's go ahead and torque everything to spec, put the wheels back on, and then we'll go for a short little ride. All right, car's warmed up. I just set the dampers to 12 out of 24, just figured go halfway. And I noticed one of them was a lot easier to turn than the other one. That's probably not a big deal, but just something I noticed. So I'm gonna go around, see if I scrape. No, okay. So the ride height is probably pretty close to stock. Do you hear that? It's pretty smooth right here. They just repaved this, but I'll go over a bumpier area. It sounds like it's still there, which is super annoying. Actually, tell you what I'll do. I'll put down the seats, so hopefully you can hear it even better. All right. Okay. Trunk. The seats are down. That's insane. That's way worse than it was. Sounds like my wheels are gonna fall off. What the hell? Okay, we're gonna do a nut and bolt check because that sounds ridiculous. If all the nuts and bolts are tight, I'm taking them off, putting the OEM back on, and I guess sending them back to Annex again. I don't know what the deal is. This is super frustrating. Something's gotta be loose. There's no way. Like, man, I feel like I was very thorough, but I mean, that much of a rattle seems to indicate otherwise. That's insane. All right, well, let's see if we can figure it out. Okay, well, we just did a test drive. The rattle was worse than before I sent it back to Annex, so it really sounds like something's loose, but I mean, I don't know. I've taken off and put on this suspension and swapped it with the OEM suspension like 5 or 6 times at this point. I have a pretty good idea of what I'm doing. And you know, I torqued everything to factory spec. Top bolts. You know what? Let's check the top bolts while there's weight on the car. We didn't tighten those in with weight on the car. We tightened it while the bolts were while the car was in the air. So let's double check those. So something interesting that they told me the first time I was emailing them and asking them about this rattle issue was to try and rotate the spring with my hand, and they said that I shouldn't be able to. Now, these are straight from Annex, and I haven't messed with these lock rings or anything at all. So, but check this out. That's not hard to turn. That's very easy to turn. I'm gonna take them back off, put the OEM ones back on. We'll take another drive, see if that rattles there. If it's not, because the last time I took them off and put the OEMs back on, the rattle went away. Oh, the bolts on the top hats were good. So I double checked the torque on those. These bolts are all tight. I mean, just finger tight. I would have to check the torque again. But I mean, you watch me on the time lapse. So I went back and looked at the maintenance manual for the rear suspension. The nuts on the upper side of the shock absorber, 22 foot-pounds, did that correctly. Lower side of the shock absorber assembly rear, 62, did that correctly. Lateral link assembly rear, 59, did that correctly. Lower side of stabilizer link rear, 28 foot-pounds, did that correctly. Lower side of stabilizer link rear, that's that one. It's 28. They said this one is a common one that is loose, but it is tightened to spec. Impact wrench wasn't used on anything to over tighten. I did use an impact wrench to just get it, you know, close, but I only put it on the second level. I still had to use a torque wrench to get it quite a bit to get it finished off to these specs. So annoying. I'm pretty upset about this. I really thought that this issue would be done, but apparently it is not, which sucks. Because other than that ridiculous rattle that got even worse, I really like the way that these feel. I guess let's take off the other side, do a nut and bolt check. Well, let me check the torque. Make sure that the torque on all the nuts are to spec. Triple check. I think they are, but let's do our due diligence.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
Annex off, OEM back on. All right, back seats open. Engine's warmed up. Take it for a spin. Wonder if the rattle's there. I put the OEMs back in the exact same way as I installed the Annex. Something tells me it's probably not going to rattle. It hasn't yet. And I could pick up on it by now with the Annex. There's a bump, no rattle. Those are my keys right next to me. Right there. If you can hear them. Here, let me move them so they don't clink and muddy the data. Still no rattle. Sounds pretty good to me. Bumps. No rattles. All right, so this is 2 or 3 times I've established when I install the OEM shocks, no rattles. When I install the Annex suspension, rattles. I don't know, folks. It's it sucks. I really wanted to like this suspension, but the proof's in the pudding, and the pudding was empty. I was really excited to get those back on. I don't know what else to say. I'm bummed out. This sucks. I gotta clean up the garage, and I don't even have new coilovers on. So I guess let's get that out of the way. I don't really know what else to say. I guess that's it. So I'll leave it there, I guess. Be sure to be kind to someone today. even if that someone is yourself. I will see you next time. Peace.